Welcome to another United We Stand. As you know, we've been speaking to our great friends in ministry, our missionaries, pastor friends, all sorts of people. And people have said to me, have you run out of friends to talk to? Well, actually, I haven't. And tonight, I'll get a chance to speak to one of our best friends, although we've not spoken for a long time, which is Rachel Waddams. I've known Rachel since she's been a teenager, and she's just been a passionate firebrand for God. Youth pastor at Calvary which is now Rise Church.
Yeah.
And then of course you get married, don't you, to and have a great family, and then God starts to stir your heart, and God asks you to plant a church in Birmingham, which is
Right.
something special, isn't it? How did that come about?
Well, it's not a quick tale, that, Steve. Like you said, I was the youth pastor along with my hubby, Andy, at Calvary Church. That's what it was there, with Pastor Paul and Gail Chamberlain. And we absolutely loved it there. And we were rooted there. We were on the leadership there. And we just always thought we would stay there. We thought we would honour them. We had no plans at all to move. But God started stirring us. And we started talking to Paul and Gail. And I think the first thing I'd say was that we wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for their blessing. They supported us, and we left really honourably with them. And the first process was a hard one, because when we first told them, it was hard. We felt like, they're our spiritual mum and dad. We just wanted to stay at home. You know what it's like, Steve. If you're leaving home, it's a hard decision. But we felt, they felt as well that it was right. Then we started praying about where, and we were coming back from seeing one of our friends in Bolton. And as we drove back, there was a massive poster over the M5 at the time. And it said, Birmingham is now open. And it was a campaign for a phone company. And we just started thinking about the city of Birmingham, and actually how much we loved it, and how many people lived in Birmingham and didn't know Jesus. And we came back and we started talking to Pastor Paul and Gail. And actually it really stirred, particularly Pastor Paul, because his dad got saved in Birmingham. And he felt that his dad always had a passion for Birmingham, even though he served in Gornal and Dudley. And he prayed a lot for the city. So we started then thinking maybe Birmingham. And then the process was, are we going to take on a church or plant a church? And there was a few churches that we possibly could take over. But then it happened that we just felt in the end, talking it all through, that actually it'd be better for us to plant. So it took us, the process was probably about 2 years. It wasn't just a quick, right, we're going to go, because we wanted to leave very honourably. I remember the final Sunday, which we were there, and obviously you go up the front and, it's emotional and everyone's praying for you. And a few people went with us who were key friends, and Pastor Paul and Gail felt they were important. And two friends, she was the children's pastor at the time, and they're still with us now. Tash and Luke, key leaders in our church. So we sort of surrounded there. There was only 7 of us on the stage, so we weren't leaving with a mass army. And we stood on the stage and people prophesied over us. And there was an element of sadness and grief. But I got the verse, you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. And the mountains and the hills will break forth before you. And as soon as we left, even though we were mourning at the loss of our friends and all that was Calvary, because we adored it, and there was many friends there that we knew we wouldn't see the same again. And obviously we were leaving a children's ministry. There was only our kids that went to plant a church. And for 5 years, there were no other children in our church. So it was a big loss in many ways to us. But as soon as we left, we felt God say, you shall go out with joy. And we felt joy come on us. And so it was amazing. Actually, when we started, we have always been in Digbeth. And Digby, this is an area which is a real down and out area of the city. It's an area where you wouldn't plant a church, but that's where God drew us. And when we started talking to Pastor Paul, that was actually the area where Pastor Gerald did his prayer walks and felt that a church would be planted. So incredible connection for us. And we've been there, and that was in 2011, October 2011. We started. So it's been a big journey, but that was the start, really.
Well, Rachel, I want all the pastors that are listening to this right now, and to our people as well, to hear just one thing, which you've articulated very clearly, and I've said for so long and so hard. Our sending capacity as leaders always should be bigger than our seating capacity. And, you know, there are times when you have to let your best go. And I think you're proof of that. And we've done it in Sedgley as well, in sending out and planting other people. But you know what? It's just the best feeling in the world, because you have a stake then in something that's far bigger than just your local fellowship. So if you're a pastor and you're listening to me and you have reservations about sending people out, do not, because God will give you back. And Arise has been blessed because you've gone. And also Springs has come out of that as well. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. And so as you send, God does not leave you short. God brings in new people and releases people. And this is the sending heart of God. And that's what I really actually wanted to get out of you, Rach, tonight, if I was totally honest, because some people look at me and go, well, do you really mean what you say, that you'll send people out? The answer is absolutely. If the call of God is on their life, let's cheer people through the front door, not let them skulk through the back door feeling that they've been overlooked and they haven't got a place to play. So, no, that's fantastic, mate. So
and you're spot on there, Steve. I know years ago when, you know, as I said, we were in the leadership of Calvary, God gave Pastor Gale a vision of 3,000 in a church. And when they retired, there wasn't 3,000 in Calvary at the time. But actually, now I think she can see more of that, because from her spiritual children, churches have come, and that could well be what actually she can see. And you know, when we do stuff online, Pastor Paul and Gal always watch it. They always put their comments in. They're very much still part of things, and it was hard for them. God really revealed to them to let us go.
Mate, it's the hardest thing in the world, especially because I know that you and Andy were such a gift to the church, and to replace people of your quality is very, very difficult. But pastors, just hear me. God will supply all you need. You just need to sow your best people out, because you can't keep people at a level that you want them to just to keep them in your church. You have to release them to greater things in God. Have to.
Yeah, and I do think that, you know, you can't, in many ways, I think, you know, you can see small, can't you? But you need to trust the bigger picture of God, you know, and who knows what would happen if we would have stayed there. I remember having a picture that we were designed as arrows in the quiver, and it was right for us to be launched out into warfare. If we stayed in the quiver, we'd never have the same challenge on the enemy, you know. And you know, it was hard, Steve. It would have been much easier for us to stay at Calvary. Definitely, we would have been blessed there, but it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. I don't think it would have been. It would have been the convenient thing. It would have been the easy thing. But you know, that's not what we're about. We're called to make disciples. We're called to reach people who aren't churched, and that's what we felt we had to do. Yeah,
so you left King Swinford and you became the Peaky Blinders, so that's great.
You know what, you're dead right there, because exactly where we are is where Peaky Blinders is.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a Peaky Blinders tour just round our church. Not in the building, but round that area.
Brilliant.
So we're very much right in the heart of the inner city, Birmingham.
So God's really blessed you, and I know, and I've always admired your passion for Jesus, and we've been good friends over many years, and we have many stories to tell, I'm certain. One of the things, obviously, that's just completely changed the face of what we're doing, though, is obviously this COVID thing. It took us all by surprise, but obviously it did take God by surprise. So what have you guys been up to? I guess you've been doing plenty of online stuff like we have.
We have, yeah. I think, we'd never done anything before, Steve. I think some of our friends around the world and some of the bigger churches, they were already filming stuff, so they had the big cameras and all that sort of jazz. But we had never filmed anything in our church. We'd never even thought of it. And that's always a bit of a surprise, because we're perhaps a bit boxed in a bit as Gallery Church. It's quite a creative church. But we just never had done it. And I remember when we thought, okay, we're going to have to film our first Sundays. And we originally started in the lounge, actually where this bookcase is, and it was just me and Andy. And sometimes the kids would pop in and would contribute. And the great thing was that Andy is so skilled at editing and all of that. So we managed that for about 8-9 weeks. And then we thought, okay, COVID is slightly retracted. So from there, we've moved sort of back into the church, and we've made the church into a studio where we the worship leaders come in, socially distanced, and then we do the film in there for the preachers and stuff, just so that it's like a little bit more. And then we had a real heart that we saw, like you, that lots of non-Christians were watching. So we've run Alpha online.
Excellent.
Amazing, because we've had somebody from Canada. We've had a couple of people from Devon. It's been amazing, the reach that God is doing. And I know that that's the case for you as well, Steve. So we've been really blessed by it. It's not always, I miss the worship, Steve, if I'm honest. The praise of being together. And so I felt the presence. And I remember we had one service where we got everyone to come into the church just on a Zoom in our church, and we just prayed in the Spirit. And as we watched on Zoom, we just saw people falling and crying.
Well, yeah,
and we couldn't. And I tell you what, Steve, even after all my years, it blew me away. And I felt God say, we don't have to lay hands on people. I'm a bigger God than that. I can reach people wherever they are. And so I feel like, when it was like even the hem of his garment was touched, or the shadow. So I've said to our folks, the shadow Zoom, even if the shadow touches you, you can feel the presence of God. So we try not to box ourselves in, but our service is a bit fun, Steve. It is a bit different. It is very creative. There's a lot of jokes and stuff like that in it. But we attract a different crowd probably by doing that. But we have to do what we want to do, don't we? We have to be ourselves, Steve. And one of the things that I would encourage pastors to be at this time is, when you look at all the churches online, it's easy to look and think, oh, maybe we should that. But keep your integrity of who you are.
Absolutely.
And what God's called you to do. And keep your identity. Don't feel you've got to go into a mould of being like everyone else online. Do your thing. I celebrate the fact that Springs, they've done their thing. It's different to us. They do like their worship in a garden. Brilliant. Looks so good. Arise, do something different. Some of our friends who've got bigger churches, they do a much bigger display of what God's doing. But we have to do our thing. We have to play our game and do it well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And one of the first things I endeavoured to do right from the beginning was we wouldn't edit anything. So me, I'm one take, Steve. So live stream Sunday morning. If I mess up with the scripture, I spit it out again. I would have done that in church. And like with these interviews, none of it's scripted. I mean, people might think, do you like prep everybody that comes on there? Are you joking? I just turn up and have so much fun just interviewing my friends. It's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing. And we've had the phone ring and people ringing the doorbell and all the rest of the stuff. But don't edit out, because it's real. It's real, and we're serving Jesus in the way that we can, and we've seen some great breakthrough, as you suggest. So
Brilliant.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And actually, Paul and Gail, I interviewed Paul and Gail. They were really funny just a couple of weeks ago, and again they mentioned you and obviously the guys at Springs, and I'm so grateful to be connected with everybody. Really, it's I think if it's done one thing, it's drawn a lot of leaders together in a more unified manner than I think we've ever been before.
Absolutely. And it's been wonderful for us because, you know, obviously on a Sunday, you know, Pastor Paul and Gail and our friends have not been able to come on a Sunday because they've been doing their church or they've been somewhere else. But now they can watch us as well and encourage, and that's just been wonderful for us. We've actually felt more connected than we ever have. Planting a church can be very lonely and quite isolating because you know you're going out on your own. I remember the very first Sunday that we had, and we'd left Calvary, this amazing worship team, amazing children's team. And the very first Sunday, we had no worship leaders, we had no musicians, we just had an iPod and we had to sing along to it. And I'm not sure I'd do a plant like that again, but it was just, that's how it started, that's how almost kind of sketchbook it was at the beginning. And so now to be in a position where we are and have musicians and leaders, but feel connected again for us in this season has been wonderful. And it's just been absolute, just to have that encouragement, Stephen. I'd say, you know, I don't know why over the years, and this is just my view, there's competition with churches, and I don't know why, Steve. We were all in the kingdom. Why we have that, I don't know. But it isolates people, and I think we need to come together. Don't worry that they're doing something different to you. They've got different numbers. You're doing what God's called you to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's come together because it's so, you don't need to be isolated.
You do not. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, the American president, that said that comparison is the thief of joy. And
absolutely.
When you meet a pastor, they go, how many people are going to church? Now they say, how many people are watching on YouTube? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because we're all seeing something, God doing something wonderful. And as you say, God's touching us in a different way. So, you know, I'm excited about what the future holds. I think more online stuff. I don't think our churches are going to be big enough to contain what God is about to do. I think from memory, I remember you telling me when you went to Saddleback, didn't you? So the purpose-driven church youth group.
That's right.
And he came back and he said to me, when they showed me the hall, I thought, wow, this is a big church. And you realise it was just the youth centre.
That was incredible, Steve, when I went there. In fact, it was an amazing time. I was part of the Youth Alive team at the time, and we did a bit of a tour, if you like, of different churches in America. We went to Saddleback, and like you said, we went in this room, and I was like, I've never seen a church that size ever. And that was their youth building. And I couldn't believe it.
I use your story so often because I preach from 2 Kings chapter 6 when the prophets come to Elisha and say the place where we're living is too limited for us, too small.
Yeah.
And then we say, my friend Rach, when she went to Saddleback, she said she went to the youth hall, and then she went, my God, we've been sold a lie. This is the youth hall.
Absolutely. But I remember as well, Steve, we went into the Crystal Cathedral. That's like in the centre of LA. And it's Robert Schuller's place. And actually, he started his church, interestingly, and I know friends who are doing this, where it was like a drive-in church. That's how he started it. At the time, in the 1950s, 60s, you'd drive in to church, get saved and drive off. But then after that, it got really sophisticated, and his church was literally like a crystal cathedral. And we went in this room, and there was all these pictures down the side of all like Diana Ross, like, you know, Lionel, all these famous people in LA. You'd all go to this church, and before you went up on the stage there, you had to have a full makeup. You had to be all done up. And they told me that their nativity service, they had real camels that would come in, because it was Hollywood, you see. They were attracting Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just the other side, literally, same city, LA, you had Matt's church there with, what was they called? And they reached all the inner city people. And they were totally the opposite. You went in, his office, there was boxes everywhere. It was just really, but they were attracting loads of Spanish community, a lot of homeless people, but they had thousands of people go to their church. And what it showed me was you've got to do what God's asked you to do.
Come on, this is good.
Same city, but two massively different churches, you know. So I'm looking forward to you having your camels. Is that what you're going to do, Steve?
Mate, we have a vision. I've told you, we have got more tattoos in our church than any tattoo parlour I've ever known in my life. God has been bringing me my mighty men, my fighters, my footballers.
Brilliant.
You're a Wolves fan like me. You know what? God only sent us Peter Odom Wingy. Can you believe that? And he came for the first time to his friend's baptism. The only chair left in the church was right next to me, and I'm looking at him. And I go, you scored 3 goals against the Wolves. What's all this about?
You gotta love your enemies, Steve.
Mate, and you know what? The boy's on fire, and I don't remember a guy called Matt Marsh, a lovely guy from Dorset.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, well, he comes to our church as well, and
Wow.
Matt's always been he's been a bad boy with his fighting and sub-arm and all that.
Steve.
Right, but him and Peter Odom Wingy, you know what? Best buddies. And isn't that amazing how God can just reconcile, you know, the last person on God's earth. And when I saw them just before we came into this lockdown situation, break bread together, it broke my heart. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
And you know, a similar thing, Steve, to when we planted the church. You know, you have your little phrases, don't you? Which I'm sure you have. Willow Creek call them your kind of catchphrases that you use that capture everything of your vision. And one that we always remind our guys is we want people, a millionaire and a homeless person, to sit next to each other.
Yeah.
And we've had that once, and the homeless person stunk, like he really smelt. And then the other guy sat next to him, a lot of money, but saved, loved Jesus, and the two sat next to each other.
Oh, mate, that's brilliant.
And I just think that can only happen in church, Steve, that you get that, where people have come together like that.
Yeah, cool. That's absolutely wonderful. I'm just gonna give you a word before I go, because I've just mentioned 2 Kings chapter 6, and I've preached it at several places and just felt the Spirit of God just to prompt me just to say, make this real. So I'm going to tell you 2 Kings chapter 6. The young prophets come to the older prophet and they say, the place where we're living is far too small for us. Rachel, where you are right now is far too small for you and Andy. God's got something bigger and better for you. So I just want you to rejoice in that.
God. Do you know, that is absolutely right. I mean, the building that we're in, Steve, we can't go back to. It's too small. So we can't fit in there. So if everyone can pray, because we've got to find somewhere else. We physically won't be able to go back into that building.
Okay.
And we've moved a couple of times before, but obviously you know what it's like, Steve, relocating, finding a venue.
Yeah, city centre, it's expensive stuff.
City centre, but you know, God is in it. And what I think with that passage, Steve, is that what I'm praying is that in this season we don't lose our axe head. Keep ourselves sharp when we, you know, because it's easy to do that, isn't it? To get worried about where we're meeting, worried about the place, and then you lose your axe head, you lose your sharpness.
Rachel, will you stop preaching my sermon? People will know where I got it from. Oh, man.
Funny.
Man, that is such an absolute delight to speak
Steve,
to you.
I've got a word for you. Can I share for you as well?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think it's in Malachi, where it says, I will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. And I feel for you, Steve, that there is a restoration coming on you, where you are turning generations towards each other, where you will literally see fathers and sons restored in your church, grandfathers. So you will reach back to the generations before, but you'll reach forward as well to the generations that are now, and you'll bring them together. And so your church won't be an old church, it won't be a young church. You've got the fathers and you've got the sons in the church.
Yep.
And I just pray that the hearts will turn, because I feel that some people, they need forgiving, they need restoring, And it's going to be some powerful reunions, Steve. Some powerful reunions.
That's absolutely right. And if you'd heard any of my preaching over the last 10 years, you'd have heard me say so many times, we are building a multi-generational church.
Great.
That is what we're building, and that's what I want from the 19-year-olds to the 9-year-olds, for them to be serving God together, and that's wonderful. What a wonderful confirmation. So I'm so grateful you've given me the time to have a chat,
Bless you.
and bless all you're doing, and give my love to Andy and the team there.
Will.
And we're behind you 100%, and we know God's got some great stuff ahead of you. So God bless you. Thanks for your time.
God
Take
bless
care.
you, Steve. God bless Sedgley.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.